So welcome everyone. Thank you for being a part of the No Code Devs community and joining this webinar today. We are super excited to have WeWeb here today where they're actually going to build something live for you. I believe Joyce is going to build a job board, but I'll let her speak to that. They're going to use WeWeb to build the front end, and it's kind of a Xano backend, which is super exciting. If you've been to any of our events before, you know that we are big fans of Xano, and we've done actually a couple different workshops with Xano to really illustrate the power of Xano's backend. So this is an awesome combination of tools. I will go ahead and pass it over to Joyce. Again, share where you're dialing in from. We'd love to hear where everyone is. And if you have any questions as this goes along, just throw your questions in the chat. We will have a dedicated Q&A at the end of the presentation. I'll pass it over to Joyce.
All right, thanks a lot. So yes, today we're going to build a job board using Xano as a backend and WeWeb as a front end. Both are no-code tools, and what the reason we want to do that is that one of the benefits of decoupling the front end from the back end is that it's really the modern way to build web applications. It brings higher performance and more flexibility, and it's really the huge benefit of WeWeb. And it allows you, basically, we allow you at WeWeb to build scalable front ends without writing code. You can build on top of any CMS, backend, or database. So an SQL database, REST APIs, Airtable, whatever you want. We love Xano. So today we're going to build a job board with Xano and WeWeb. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a Xano template and a WeWeb template. So you'll be able to do exactly the same on your side. Don't worry about doing it at the same time here. Art will send you the replay of this video, and I will send you a PDF with step-by-step so you can do exactly the same in pretty much 30 minutes on your end. So really, focus on understanding. If you have any questions, a couple of people from the WeWeb team are in the chat, and they'll be here to help. And of course, we'll have the Q&A at the end. Okay, so let me actually copy paste, drag in here in the chat what we're going to go through. The idea is first we'll want to set up a project in WeWeb and Xano. So here I'm in WeWeb, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a job board template, and let's call it No Code Devs, and create the project. And Xano, and both Xano and WeWeb offer free plans. So you can create a free account with Xano, and in their marketplace here, you'll find the careers template, which is the one we're using now. So we've already installed it. When you install the template, you get 3 database tables and 16 API endpoints. So the 3 tables, you have a list of jobs, a list of job applications, and a list of job categories. So for example, human resources, marketing, quality assurance. And for APIs, Xano automatically, whenever you create a table, automatically creates API endpoints. And right away, we're going to go and copy the API endpoint that gets all the jobs from the job table in Xano. And so we copied this endpoint, and we go back to WeWeb. And in WeWeb, we open the project we just created. And we go ahead and add data. So we'll call it all jobs. We'll add a collection called all jobs. The source is a new source. We don't have any sources yet. So here we'll choose REST APIs, but as I was mentioning earlier, it could be a SQL database, Airtable, Ghost, anything you want. So let's add an Airtable data source, select it here, and move on. And this is where we paste the API endpoint we just copied from Xano. If I click continue, you see this is the data that Xano returns. So you can see if we click on items, that's where the jobs actually are. So what we can do is we can just add the items as a result key here. That way we just directly get the clean data, the list of jobs. Okay, so we get the jobs from Xano into WeWeb. Now we want to display them on a page in WeWeb. So with your template, the job board template, you have a page with all the jobs. In the navigator here in WeWeb, you can see here you have a collection list. And inside, we've included 3 job containers. This is to help you visualize the fact that there would be collection items, but you can actually get rid of those 2 containers and bind your list, your collection, to the collection list. Now, this is where you would do it. You'd go ahead and get all the data from all the jobs. And you see now that in your navigator, you still have only 1 job container, but you have 6 repeated items. And that matches the 6 jobs that we have here in Xano. So to make it more obvious, let's bind the job title here. Boom, title. And you see here, quality assurance officer. And let's get rid of everything that we don't need, just to make things cleaner and easier for you to read. Okay, so we'll get rid of this, get rid of that. And here, maybe we can bind the type of contract. So if it's a full-time contract, and we can get rid of this. So you see now those six job titles that match the job titles in our Xano database. Okay, cool. So we've showed you how to get data from an API and display it on WeWeb. Now, maybe you want to filter through that data. So one way to filter it would be, for example, to have a list of job categories and be able to filter through that. So you can just, in the add menu, you can drag and drop the drop down element. And the way the drop-down element works is here you can add options manually, or we could just go back to Xano, go back to our API endpoints, and go copy the API endpoint that gets all the categories from our category table, and then we'll create a new collection in WeWeb. So job categories, REST API, let's go. We copy it. Now we know that we have to type in items. This is specific to Xano, by the way. Other REST APIs may put the data in with a different result key. So here we have our categories. They're right here. So what we can do now is back on the drop down, the options will bind them here to our list of job categories. So you see now in preview mode, I can go ahead and, oh, no, I forgot one thing. Let's go back to the editor. Here, I need to, the field that I want to display is the category. So it's, if I go back to my database category, it's this field here that I want to display. So I choose it here, and back in preview mode, I want to select the option, quality assurance, marketing, and nothing happens. The reason nothing happens is because here on my collection list, right here, I need to go back to my collection and add a filter. So the condition, and here we've selected marketing. And if we go to our navigator, we can see that here in our drop-down value, which is automatically created when we drag and drop the select element on the page, the value is 4. This is because marketing has the ID 4 in Xano. So now what we have to do is we have to go on the collection, add a filter, and say if the category, so just to show you what the item of in the collection item looks like, we have a category here, which is an array. So if the category contains the ID drop-down value, then that's the filter I want. So we'll just apply this if the component variable drop-down value is not empty. So let's go ahead now. Here you go. Now it filters through marketing. If we go change to software development, you get human resources. You see that it just updates automatically. Now, that's one way we can filter data. We can also filter with a search. The search bar is actually included in the template, but if you need to find it, it's in the add menu. You can go ahead and drag and drop it on the page. Again, when you drag and drop one of these native elements, you'll automatically get a variable here It already exists, the search bar value. So if I type in something here, let's say I type in manager, it updates the variable here, but not, again, nothing happens to the collection list. That's because I need to add another condition. So to my filter. So let's add a new condition group where I want either the title to contain my search bar variable or the description of the job contains my search term. And this I will also apply if the search term is not empty. So you can write it this way, or you could be more explicit and say if empty. So if my search variable value is empty, then I don't want to apply this condition. Otherwise, I do want to apply the filter. All right, so let's go for it. Here we have everything. If I add manager, it filters through manager. And just to be clear, I'm showing you, because our tool is a front-end tool, I'm showing you how to do filters in the front end. But obviously, or maybe not obviously, but it's important to understand that if you have huge data set, it sometimes makes sense to do the filters in your back end. So make sure that you only do filters in your front end if you've already, you only have a small amount of data coming through to your front end, and you just need the browser, your user's browser, to be very reactive to changes. Okay, so we've done this. We've displayed the list of jobs in WeWeb. We've learned how to filter through it. Now, what we would love to do is we would love for the user to be able to actually click on a job and go see the details of that job listing. So in order to do that, I'm going to go, there are lots of different ways you could do this. In this case, what I want to do is I want to make it super explicit. So I'll just add a button here in my repeated item. And you see, I only have to drag and drop it once. And I'll add view job description. Here we go. And what I'll do is on this button, which is here, I'll add a workflow. So it'll be go to job page. On click, so when the user clicks on this button, what I want to happen is I first want to change a variable value. So the variable value, we'll create a variable called selected job. It will be an object variable, and we'll save it in the user's browser. So it will be an object variable because we want to get all the information from the repeated item. And what we'll do here is we'll update it, and the new value will be this, the entire object. So just to clarify, this is the repeated item from the collection list. So you have your list, your array of data on the collection list, and then the first child of this collection list, so in this case, a flexbox with a job container flexbox, that's the repeated item. And if I go ahead and select this, it will show a different item. Now, once we've updated the selected job variable with the information from the job that the user just selected, we'll want to change page. So we'll change page and we'll go to the job template page of our template. So let's go ahead and hit preview. I'll show you here. This is the selected job variable that we just created. And if we click, let's say, on product design manager, boom, the selected job variable is suddenly filled with information on the product design manager job, which is ID 5 in Xano, which is right here, this one here. So back in here, we land on a template page and you see front-end developer, but that's actually just a placeholder. So what we can do now is on this page, we can bind the data from our selected job variable, product design manager, for example. We'll put the title of the job. And here, this is by default with a template, but you can erase it. We'll go ahead and get the description of the job. And so if I go back, for example, if I go back here, we'll go to jobs, I'll go into preview mode, and you see if I click on a different one on HR manager, this will change. Now it's ID4, and this will change as well, because now this is bound to this information here. All right. So we've done this. Now the next step is we want to allow users to actually upload their resume and actually apply for a job. And then the last step will be, letting authenticated user to apply for a job. So let's first start by letting them upload a file. So we have in the template, you have this this form container here. What we'll do is we'll go ahead and add a file upload element. We'll add it here, and we'll go to our variables. Here we'll see these two variables were just created when I dragged and dropped this element. So now what we want to do, let me show you. If I go into preview mode, if I start filling this out, you will see the information fill out in the variable here, which again, you can find in the navigator. So in your navigator, you have the HTML tree here and all your variables. And okay, so my email is joyce@weweb.io. I'm based in Paris, France, not Texas, and I love Colombo. And let's go ahead and upload a file. I'll go ahead and have this here, and that's all for now. So I have an object file here. You see the file progress is 0. Now, what I want to do is I'll go back on my form container, which is, it's important that you select the form container. That's where you want to add a workflow, not on the submit button, but really on the form container. And on this workflow, what I want this workflow to do is I want to send application to Xano, actually. So the event will be on submit, when the user submits the form. The first thing I want to do is I want to upload the file. And this is the variable I was showing you. Let's test the action. And when you test the action, you need to have uploaded a file here. If I hadn't already uploaded the file, it would bring an error message. So I have uploaded the file, and you see here, I get a URL. And this is important for the next step. So the next thing I want to do, once I've uploaded, the user has filled out the information, in the form container, and they've uploaded the file. I made sure they uploaded the file through the workflow. Now I want to make an API request, and it will be a post request. So back in Xano, back in our API endpoints, I'm going to go to application and choose this API endpoint. So the API endpoint that allows me to send a job application to Xano. So to send information from WeWeb to the application table in Xano. So I'll copy this and go back to WeWeb and paste this here. All right. Now with the I need to tell Xano what information I'm sending them. So back in my application base, the first thing I want to send is the job underscore ID. So I'll add this as a field, job underscore ID. And remember, I have this value in the variable select a job. This is the job ID. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to send the user's name. So I'll go ahead and add an item, call it name, and it's important, it's case sensitive. So we have name, it's written this way. And the name will be from a component variable. It will be the candidate name. All right, next thing I want is, I don't want the phone number, I want the email. So let's go ahead and add the email. And my variable is the email value. And the resume, if you remember, the way the file uploads work in WeWeb is that we get a URL. So in this case, I'm just going to change the template, the Xano template a little bit. I'm going to change this type. The resume, I will change it to a text field. And it will be very obvious in a second why. I'll change it to a text field. And here I will go ahead and add the resume item. And the value in this case, I will go to my workflow and get the result from the previous action. And it's this URL. And there you go. And the last thing is the status. So let's go status, and I'll just type this in, pending review. All right, so that should work. Now let's go ahead and test this. So I filled all this information, I uploaded the file. Let's now submit the application. And if I go to Xano, I'll refresh my page, and there you go. I applied as for the HR manager position, and I have my email address, and this is where it's important. I have this URL, which is actually the URL of the PDF that I uploaded. So if you can actually copy paste it in a browser, and that's the URL. So in this case, it's a deck about how web agencies are using no code to grow faster, but it would be a resume in our use case. All right, so we updated we know now how to do GET requests in WeWeb to get information for Xano. We know how to do a POST request in WeWeb to push data to Xano. The last thing we want to do is we actually want to allow users to authenticate to our web app. And so when they've logged into, or when they've signed up and logged into our web app, we don't need to ask them their email again. We don't need to ask them their name. We can just link their application to our user base. So in the careers template, you don't have a user table in Xano. So that's the first thing we need to do. We'll create a user table. Here we go. And in our user table, we will want an email address, and we will want a password. And it's important that you use the password field in Xano. That is what ensures that the data is secure. I'm going to show you now. For example, if I create a user and I use a silly password like password 123, as soon as I hit enter, I cannot see the password anymore. So when users create an account in your web app, and you use Xano as authentication, you will not be able to see their password, and that's the way it should be. So that's why Xano is a real backend in this sense, compared to a tool like Airtable where you wouldn't be able to protect user information in that way. Okay, so we have this user table now in Xano. We need to, in the settings, make sure that we enable authentication for this table. And automatically it created user API endpoints when we created the user table, but we still need to manually add authentication endpoints. So first the sign up one, and there are 3 of them. So the login, and finally the current user authentication API point. All right. The reason you need to do this is because then in WeWeb, you go here in WeWeb in the plugins. So in the plugins, you can add data sources, Chart.js. You can also add authentication. In our case, we're going to use Xano authentication. You could use any token-based auth as well, or auth0, but we'll use Xano auth. So we'll add it here. You have all the step-by-step here, so don't worry about retaining. And what we'll do is we'll just copy the sign up link and paste it here. The only tricky part here is make sure you're copy pasting in the right one. So the sign up, the login goes here, and the me goes right here. All right. And the page, when the user is not signed in, we're actually going to create a page, a sign up page. And we'll just do it here. We'll start with this as a template. All right, so on our sign up page, I'll go back into editing mode and just delete everything that's in this container. I don't need it. As soon as you add the Xano auth plugin, you'll have in your add menu, you'll get these Xano auth specific elements. And here we'll just drag and drop the sign up form in our container. And here on the form container, what we'll do is, so automatically it has a sign up action with Xano. What we'll do is we'll just say, as soon as they sign up, we want to change page and go to our jobs page. Okay, so let's give this a try. In preview mode, Joyce, because I already have a user called Joyce at WeWeb.io here that I just created earlier to show you. I'm just going to add this plus test, because if I was trying to sign up as an existing user, it wouldn't work. So I'm just doing it this way, and let me sign up now. And there you go. So I'm redirected to this list of jobs. And in Xano, if I refresh my user base, I will now have Joyce test. And as you can see, no, you cannot see my password, which is a good thing. And back in WeWeb, what we would want now is, let's go in the job descriptions. And the last thing we want to do really is to modify slightly our workflow. So we can get rid of the email, for example. We don't need it anymore because we'll have that information because the user is logged in. And so what we want to do is in the workflow, so on our form container in the workflow, we're just going to, actually, let me first go back to my application. The first thing I need to do is in Xano, in my application, I'm going to add a table reference field referring to the user. And so now I have a new field called user_ID. And now back in WeWeb on the form container in the API request, I'm going to delete the email key because I don't need it, but I'm going to add a user_ID. And the value here will be a Xano auth variable. If I go inside my user, it's ID2 here, and you can see it's ID2 here as well. I'm logged in as Joyce plus test. Well, that's how I just signed up. And so now that I've changed this, we should be good to go again. So let's give this another go. I'm still Joyce. I'm still in Paris. We'll have cookies, and I can upload this again and submit this. And now in Xano, if I refresh this, there you go. Now this is my application with for the quality assurance officer position. I'm no longer sending an email address because I don't need to. I have the email address here since I have the user ID information because I'm logged into Xano. So that's it really in terms of like really, it took us less than 30 minutes to build this, and obviously it's still rudimentary. You would want, for example, to maybe show either redirect the user somewhere else at the end of this workflow, or maybe you would want to display a success message to show them they submitted the form. Maybe, there are a lot of things you could do. You could get them to save jobs, and then they would be able to access the save jobs here. All of this is absolutely doable. You can make, this is with the job board template as it exists now in WeWeb, but obviously you could design it to look very different. This is an example of something else I worked on during an internal hackathon. So you could add, you could filter differently. You could have things display differently. So, for example, having a login to apply and then displaying a pop-up to display the Xano auth. So yeah, the sky is the limit. You can do really pretty much anything you want in the front end in WeWeb, and Xano is also very, very strong when it comes to the back end without having to write code. So this was a lot of information, I'm sure. If you have any questions, really go for it. Rest assured, we'll have you'll have the replay, so you'll be able to go through things at your own pace, and I'll send you as well a PDF where you can do exactly the same thing step by step. But yeah, if you have any, can you do things like save jobs in dashboard? So like save jobs and have them appear on the user's profile. Is that what you mean, Paul? Yeah. Yeah, so absolutely. What you could do is, for example, you could create a workflow here that says, you could create a workflow where when the user clicks on here, it saves it. And then you might have a page with the user's profile. And on that page, you would show the list of jobs that they saved. So that's completely doable, and it's with the same logic as the workflow where when you click on view job description, you update the selected job variable. Here you could have you could create a variable, for example, with saved jobs, and it would be an array. You would save it in the user's local storage in this case, or you could just send it to Xano if you had in Xano in the user profile. So the way you might do it then in Xano is in your user profile, you might have an extra field with your list of saved jobs. There's any number of ways you could do it. But basically then you would just add a workflow and save and have it save in your saved jobs variable in a similar way that we did for the selected job variable.
Awesome. Another question here was, can any element, I'm just reading some of the ones from the chat for the benefit of someone who's watching this video afterward and can't see the chat. Can any element have workflows? And it looks like the answer is yes. Any element can have a workflow.
Yeah. And actually any container as well can have a collection list. So in your elements, we've named one element collection list to make it very clear in your navigator. So here, for example, in the navigator, you can see very clearly that you can bind items here because it's purple, but actually you could bind to any container. What's important to understand is that if you bind to a container, so for example, if I bind this flexbox to a collection list, the first child is the repeated item. So in this case, it would only be the first text element that would be the repeated item. And suddenly this second text would kind of become obsolete and not useful. So it's just something to keep in mind if you want to bind to any container, to remember that the repeated item is then the first child. So if you want to repeat it CRUD, so like we have here, for example, this is a CRUD. So you would want this to be, all of this to be in one container so it can repeat. Did that make sense? Was that?
Yeah, I think so.
The collection.
Yep, go ahead.
Paul is asking, can the collection list be connected to the user? E.g., for example, a user has set a preference for developer, so when he logs in, he only sees dev jobs. Yeah, absolutely. So in the, if I go to my variables here, from the components, can I see it here? Yeah, so here you can see the Xano auth variables. So you will have all the information that's in your user table from Xano. So if you had a field with the saved jobs or your field with your preferred categories, if you had that field in your user table in Xano, you would see it here. And then since you can see it here, you would be able to add a condition to your filter here and say, for example, the job category contains, and then go ahead and have the list of job categories that were saved, that were identified as preferable by the user.
Awesome. Thank you. And Joyce, by the way, I didn't sort of jump in and sort of say this after the presentation. I don't know about anyone else on the call, but just seeing the power of WeWeb and Xano together. I hope for most people on this call, realizing what a cheat code and superpower these tools are. This is unbelievable and should really, blow people's minds. The things that you can build with the logic that you're, creating here with authentication, all in about 30 minutes. It's incredible. So this is a great time for anyone on the call to ask questions. You literally are going straight to the source right here. So feel free to ask any additional questions in the chat. We'll leave it open for a couple more minutes here if anyone has any questions. I know there were a lot of questions as the presentation went on that got sort of answered in line. So thank you to the WeWeb team for answering those as we progressed. But looks like, oh, that was just Prakash. Xano loves WeWeb. Yeah, so there's some Xano people on the line as well. So potentially you could ask a question related to Xano too. Obviously, the WeWeb folks are pretty familiar with the Xano backend. Why we're just waiting to see if anyone else has a question. Why don't you provide some information, just how anyone can get in touch with you in case they're watching this replay offline, or they see this at a later point and they want to connect with the WeWeb team.
Sure. One quick thing before, I'm just going to mention that here in the Xano auth variable, you can see the user is authenticated because I just signed up. So obviously sometimes it will be false, and that's very powerful for conditional display. You can obviously gauge content and display different information whether they're authenticated or not. But yeah, to reach out, really, if you have an account with us, we have a one-on-one support chat. We're always available. We have a community. We have a discourse community here that's more and more active, so we're really excited about it. We're on Twitter at WeWeb_IO. Of course, you can email me at joyce@weweb.io. And what we do as well, we've started doing this actually inspired by Xano, because I attended Xano's orientation about a month ago, and I thought it was really cool. So in the dashboard in WeWeb, you can see that you have a link to the Academy, which is a bunch of videos where it's kind of like you search for something. For example, you search on how to build a job board with WeWeb and Xano, and you can see this. We have a link to the community and also a link to one-on-one chat. That's if you want to book time like 30 minutes with someone on the team. We do that as well. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. We personally, and I think most of us on the team, it's our favorite times when we get to talk to users and learn from them. So yeah, you will never be a nuisance. It's always a pleasure. So go for it. Don't be embarrassed or shy.
I have a question. We talked about filtering data on the front end versus the back end in Xano. Is there a certain amount of records that's sort of like a breaking point that you would generally recommend as a rule to begin filtering on the back end versus the front end in WeWeb?
Like usually, I would say and maybe Aurélie and Quentin would disagree in the chat. But for me, it's if you have less than 100 in your front end, 100 records, then it's fine. It'll go fast. As soon as it gets heavier, you might ask yourself, do you really need all this data in the browser? And it can still be responsive with more items, but it's just what's the experience you want to provide your users? Should you really have all this data in their browser? Because if you don't filter it in the back end, even if you add pagination and even if you add filters in your front end, all the data that you haven't filtered in your back end will be loaded in your browser or in your user's browser. So that's heavy and that takes time. And the way, the question to ask yourself is, how can you limit that data? So for example, location, or as Paul mentioned, if the dev, if the user already has preferences related to development and you know that, and you have that information in your backend, you might as well filter it from the backend and not even bother loading stuff that the user doesn't need.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah, I think we're just about out of time, and I do want to respect everyone's time for sure. This is about the time we slotted today. So a huge thank you, Joyce and WeWeb, for coming on and doing this workshop today with no code devs. These are always very informational. I especially like this one. I love it when we combine tools and show the power of combining two different tools together. This was really, really cool. Thank you so much. For anyone who joined late, this was recorded and we will email out a recording within 48 hours. This will also be published on our YouTube channel. So find No Code Devs on YouTube. We will publish it to our webinar playlist on YouTube as well. You can find all of our past webinars there as well. We've done a few with Xano and a bunch of other ones with other no code tools. So I think that's it, unless you need anything else to add anything else, Joyce, but thank you everyone for being here.
No, it was awesome. Thanks a lot. And again, don't hesitate to reach out. We're here to answer any question you might have and help you out and point you in the right direction, whether that's WeWeb or not. That's no problem. Just ask us anything.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.